to having a number 4 pick? Are you opposed to trading or listening, or are you going to stand pat?
Well, I don't think anybody could be able to say for certain what they're going to do right now. People always ask, who are you guys going to take? I'm like, well, tell us who goes 1, 2, and 3, then I'll have a better idea to be able to tell you what we may do at 4. But I think we would always listen, and we would want to entertain any offer that somebody had that we felt like could strengthen our football team. So, I mean, to say what that's going to be right now, I don't think we would have a great idea of what that would be.
But you're open to all possibilities.
Of course, yeah.
Mike, where do you stand on arm length for tackles? Obviously, there's some good ones there.
Yeah, I mean, I think the arm length is good only up until the point to where you use it, right? I mean, I think if guys are sitting there and they're catching or they're clamping or their hands are outside, they're not as long as maybe they would be if you punched. And, you know, so much technique changes now with, you know, having seen some of the offensive linemen and probably being with that group a little bit more extensively last season in Cleveland. There's a lot of independent hand punchers. There's, you know, players that'll punch with independent hand and then bring the second one in, or there's 2-hand punchers. So I think the most important thing is how you use whatever length you have. If you're a long arm player that uses the length, then great. That's an added plus. If you're maybe an average length player that doesn't use the length, that would be difficult. But if you're using it, then that can be positive.
Mike, you guys have added Ryan Cowden since we spoke to you last. Why?
Well, because I believe in what Ryan can do and the impact that he can make with our organization, with personnel to help Elliott and that crew. And just try to help us get the right players in here.
How do you view sort of the hierarchy there? And I guess put it another way, who has final say when it comes to making personnel decisions? Well,
I wouldn't be here, and I wouldn't have wanted to be the head coach here if I wasn't comfortable in my impact on the roster. So we want to, you know, continue to have great conversations with the personnel staff, with me, with Stretch, with coaching. We're all just trying to find ways to bring the right players in here, whether that's first part of free agency, middle of free agency like we talked about at a draft, or there's going to be players that get released that we'll have to pivot to and have options. So, again, we need to strengthen the roster. We understand that. And again, have some really good conversations about how we get there.
Mike, with Stretch, how important was he to be a part of?
Very important for me. I mean, he's meant a lot to me. He's meant a lot to the success that we had in Tennessee. His growth in this business of NFL football, the connections that he makes with our staff and our players, and they know that he's an extension of me. And if they need, maybe they don't have a strong enough connection with me to say something, that they certainly will be able to find an avenue with Stretch as a point of contact.
For lack of a better, is he your Ernie Adams? Is he like the secret behind your success? That kind of.
We're not big into comparisons. Stretch is probably a little more. He's got a little bit better sense of humor than Ernie Adams. I think what Ernie did was critical, and Stretch is very unique and he's important to me, and I value him extremely high.
Mike, obviously you guys are going to be doing things a little bit differently on offense and defense this year. How do you feel about the fit of players on the current roster?
I mean, I think what the roster looks like today is going to be vastly different than what it looks like in the end of August. And we got a lot of time, so the fit, the players will determine their role, just like we always say, how hard they work, what they're willing to do to help us, how many positions that they can play, their versatility. So we got a lot of time for that. But if they show up, they're willing to learn, they're willing to work hard, be a great teammate. You can find places for guys like that.
Mike, at receiver, how difficult is it to find a top flight guy, and how aggressive do you guys need to be to add, someone who can help Drake in that area?
Well, I mean, I think you have to. One, it's hard to find. You usually got to draft them. But then sometimes, based on circumstances, available for trade. And I think that we'll explore every opportunity that we can to add great players that we feel like are the right fit and that can help us. So, there's only so many options in free agency and a trade and the draft. So we'll explore all three of those.
You talked about getting a chance to meet and connect with some of the defensive linemen last night. Anyone else in this draft, any other specific positions in this draft that you've seen to this point that kind of jump out to you?
Well, I think that there's some depth at offensive line as we headed into this process of the draft meetings with the college scouts, which I enjoyed. Watching through those players and seeing some of the conversations that they had and some of the affinity that they had for players on the offensive line as well. So we'll get into that when those guys get here, and we'll meet with them. And again, this is early on in the process, but it's an important step here with the interviews and kind of some of these guys that just getting to know them and figuring out what's the next step. Do we go visit them? Do our coaches Zoom with them? Do we go to the pro day? All those different exposures. So I think this is just a good step.
It seemed like.
Oh, you can.
Oh, thank you. It seemed like during your time in Tennessee, very little blitzing, a lot of four-man rushes, and we saw something similar in the Super Bowl. So I'm curious for you, how important is it to be able to get after the passer, rushing only four, and what do you look for in those?
Well, I think that you have to pick and choose your spots. And again, it's not about the blitz; it's about the blitzer. It's the player that's blitzing. And so, if we have an opportunity to get a player on a running back and they can beat the running back and as they're rushing, then we want to do that as much as we can. But if you don't have a player that's going to beat the running back, then it doesn't really make sense getting that matchup, and we'll focus on the pass rushers that we have. So it's about picking and choosing your spots. But if you can affect the quarterback with playing a four-man rush and playing some zone or being able to get some vision on the quarterback, I think that the ball production will increase. And or do you have to take guys out of coverage to try to affect the quarterback, and there's always issues with that as well. So we want to be balanced and do what our players probably can execute the best.
When you think about sitting here as a first-year coach in 2018 and everything that's happened since then, and being here now second time around, curious what areas stand out to you, where you've grown as a coach?
Well, probably just a little bit more comfortable, I think, confident in what we want to do. And how we got there, making it all about the player, making a connection with them, finding out what they need, how can I help you reach your potential, and just understanding how important honesty is and my ability to protect the football team and protect the Patriots and making sure that everybody's living up to that standard.
Mike, when you talk about strengthening the roster and exploring all avenues, what do you see as the greatest challenges ahead of you this offseason to strengthening the roster, a position, a certain player, or time of the year?
We're not afraid of anything. Like, we just have to have options, right? You can't just say give me one. We're going to get this guy, because that's not going to. You're not going to bat 1,000. Everybody else is trying to go for the same player. So, having a really detailed plan and approach is probably the only thing that I would make sure that we are doing, which I believe we are, and then being able to quickly pivot on to the next option and understand where that line is. We're just not going to sign players just to sign them, but making sure that we have a plan in place for, okay, if it's not this player, then is it this player, and then it's this player, and then that's what I want to make sure that we do.
Mike, just getting back to Mark's question on receivers, for what you want to be offensively, is it vital that you have a quote-unquote number one kind of guy?
I think everybody wants to have it. Like, we've won games certain ways in the past, and again, what's ideal? I'm not going to sit here and tell you what we can't do something, right? But the better players you have, the easier it is to win in this league. That's the bottom line. And so, if not, then we'll find other ways to win. Like I've mentioned this, like Josh has won games in this league as a coordinator without Tom Brady. Like, I've played against him. He's had plans for each quarterback. And so I use that as an example. Terrell has been part of defenses that probably on paper didn't stack up to the offenses that they were going against. But we found, and there was a plan, the players understood it. So again, we'll be ready to make sure that our players are prepared every possible way. If we find a one receiver, they're just not walking around here, and let me know if they are. We'll get them. But we're gonna do everything that we can.
I've heard you say this a couple of times over the course as a player, then as a coach, that you used to watch the draft every year to see who they were replacing with. How important is it for the rest of the roster to understand that level of competition?
I think that that's okay to explain. I would explain that to the player. Like here, when people say, oh, NFL is a business, like, of course, we're in professional football to provide for our families. We want to win a championship, clearly. But we all do this to provide for our families. Let's be as transparent as possible. And so what you explain to the players of the business of the National Football League is that every day that Elliot and I and Ryan and everybody in this building has come to work, in theory, we're trying to find younger, cheaper, better players. Like, that's the goal. And what the veteran player's job is to not let that happen and to say, you can't win without me. You have to have me, a 6th or 7th year player, at this compensation. And that's the competition that goes on. I knew that. Like, and it's okay to explain that to the player. That's not a negative thing, right? And so they have free agency, and they've earned that right, and they've bargained for that. And so they play really well for us. They either earn another contract from us, or they go and they get to explore free agency, and they get another contract, and they get to take care of their family. And so we all have to be very honest and upfront and open about that.
Mike, this week here at the Combine, obviously a long week for you guys with interviews and drills. What do you find the most useful aspect of the Combine?
Just the interviews. I mean, the workout's going to be on the next day. The drills haven't changed in 30 years, so the same drills. Like, just want to talk to these guys and, you know, get to know them briefly, see how they act in this setting. You know, that's important.
You try to rattle guys, or is that part of that?
I mean, it can kind of go in any different direction. You know, really, we want to just see them in their authentic self and be genuine and, you know, honest. You know, to see how they respond and pivot and different questions coming from different ways.
Mike, in your internal evaluation of the roster specific to Mike Owenu, what have you learned in terms of where he ideally would fit in your perfect role?
I'm not going to get into predictions or where that's going to be schematically. I've enjoyed the conversations that we've had. I think he wants to be coached. I think he wants to improve on you know, the performance last year. I think there's a lot there for us to improve. I think in a technique standpoint, and you know, again, I'm just excited about the conversations that we've had. It sounds like he wants to, you know, he wants to be a part of this thing and help us, and we're excited to be able to help him.
Two final questions. With your roster building philosophy, would you say the priority is to make sure that the scheme is tailored to some of the key players, or are you trying to bring in guys that are going to fit your vision for the offense and defense?
I mean, I think that, you know, it's got to all come together. You know, if you're paying a premium, I think it's got to be the right fit, or, you know, I mean, but, you know, I've never been like, oh, we don't have that scheme. Like, you can go back and we've played a lot of different things, and we've thrown it, we've run it, outside zone, different runs, defense. We played a 3-man front, 4-man. We've played cover 2. We played man when we had to. We've done a lot, and I think that that's just the flexibility that you have to have in this league. To say, well, he doesn't fit our scheme. Like, does he play hard? Is he a good teammate? Does he show up on time? Does he care? Does he study? Like, we'll find a place for him.
When it comes to free agency, just how do you guys make yourself an attractive destination for some of the top of the market guys besides money, obviously?
I went to Houston at my first time in coaching in the NFL, and I was working for Bill O'Brien, and I said, well, they had this field that was in trays, 6 foot by 6 foot, and it was grass. And I said, why you guys got grass in the dome? And they said, well, we think it'd be good for free agents. I said, the only thing free agents care about is green, and it's not grass. So that's a good place to start, is you got to be able to pay them accordingly to the market and what somebody else is willing to pay them. I think you talk about our program and what we want to do and the people that we have in our building and the vision that we have for it and how we're going to use them. Players that we've developed in the past, I think a great thing is testimonial. Here's what we've done. Here's what we will do. Here's where we see you fitting in. And if that works for you, then let's make it happen if it's good for both sides. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
You got it.
you very much.